I'm Bella Kosmala. I work from the Europeans UK. I'm currently seconded to the GLA, where I lead on the work on European Londoners for the Mayor of London. I'm joined today by colleagues from the Europeans UK, Ceci and Tamara. And we also have with us Pietro from the Comites and Mihai from the Roma support group. We are going to be talking about a recently launched report by the Europeans UK called Digital Status Handle with Care, funded by Trust for London. And as a way of introduction, I'll just say a few things about the EU settlement scheme before I hand over to Tamara Flanagan. So the EU settlement scheme is a new immigration system that was set up as a result of the UK's decision to leave the EU. And the scheme is for EU citizens and their family members who want to stay in the UK, and it means that they need to apply for a new digital status here. So even though freedom of movement will end this year, 31st of December, there's a grace period built into the scheme, which means that we have until the 30th of June 2021 to apply. And to date, over 4 million people have done so and been granted status under the scheme. And we've got about 200,000 people who are still waiting for an outcome. Worth noting is that 55% of those granted status have been given the permanent settled status, which leaves about 1.7 million people who will need to reapply to the scheme, converting their pre-settled to settled status. So I'll hand over to Tamara.
So New Europeans has been working with EU citizens since the referendum, in the first instance, making sure that people had their voices heard in terms of the impact of the referendum. And then when the new immigration status was introduced, joining the group at the Home Office, looking at what kinds of elements needed to be included in the status. That group continues to this day to try and iron out any sorts of problems that might arise with the status. And then when the status was formally introduced in 2019, assisting particular groups with making their applications. And the two groups that we have with us today are two of the three groups that we've helped, Italians, particularly older Italians, and members of the Roma community, and particularly Roma families. And what we began to notice a year into doing the support work for the scheme was that there were particular challenges for people who did not have access to digital means, and where the scheme, which is wholly digital, the first one ever of its kind in the UK, has been introduced as a very smooth, effortless approach. This is not the case for people who do not have good IT skills, do not have access to smartphones, do not have access to computers. And in the same time, we noticed that not only did people struggle to make the application, they needed help from family, friends, the organizations with whom we worked, but they also, having applied, didn't really understand what the status amounted to, and particularly were very much in the dark about how they could ever prove they had this status. They receive a Home Office from the email saying, you have been admitted to the scheme, you now have a digital status, but the Home Office are adamant in saying the email has no validity. And so it is that people who are really quite untutored in digital matters, and that's the groups that we've worked with particularly, find themselves saddled with a status that they maybe can't even use. So we thought it was good to get some figures to the number of people who may struggle with this status going forward, so that we could talk to people about how those folk can be helped to reside here in the UK in an unproblematic fashion without being plagued by the need to prove something which is absolutely beyond their means in many cases. And I mean beyond their capacity, because they're not that good at working with computers and so forth. That led us to say, let's undertake this piece of research. And luckily, the Comites and also the Patronato, actually, who are another Italian welfare group, and Mihai from Roma Support Group, whom we've also worked with for the last couple of years, were able to assist us with this. So led by Cecilia Mellana, who is our EUS advisor and very capable researcher, we undertook the work.
I'd like to introduce Pietro Molle from the Comites, which is a welfare group that supports Italians living overseas. And Pietro works for the organization here in the UK. Pietro, the research found that nearly 40% of the people had to access information in other languages. How did this influence access to the scheme and how organizations could help?
Yes, thank you, Bella. I would like to say that first I would like to say that the Italian community in England is a very large one. We estimate that the Italians living in England are nearly 700,000. Such a large community is bound to be formed by various groups. There are professionals like doctors, consultants, researchers. There are also university lecturers, and there are university students. But the Italian community is also formed by people who came to the UK in the 1950s and 1960s and in the 1970s, who after working in the coal mines or in brickwork companies and also in hospitals as orderly, now retired. And the consular statistics tell us there are at least 41,000 on the register who are above 65 years old. And when the new settlement scheme was first introduced, we knew that it was going to be particularly hard and difficult to make the application for this part of our community, which is the most vulnerable one.
So how did Comites manage to help this older generation of Italians living in the UK?
We went to the cities where Italians were congregated more. And through the local organizations, we organized meetings with the help of the new Europeans as well, who could help us making the applications. We were asking in English and translated into Italian.
Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges for the Italian community, especially seeing as more than half of the respondents over 65 don't have their own smartphones or email address or computer?
Well, we are very concerned about the future, actually, because as we can see from the statistics, even the ones published by the Home Office, that only the 2% of over 65s have applied, then we see that we will have quite a few problems starting from January. We completely agree with the recommendations put forward by the report. In particular, we favor the extension of the 30th of June deadline, at least a year, because, as I said, if the statistics of the Italian consular are right, we have 41,000 over 75, and only maybe 7,000 or 8,000 Italians have applied. So we'll have we will need more time to go around and help Italians making the applications. We also favor the extension of the use of paper applications, so they will not have to use the computer, and also the physical the issue of the physical document, which is very, very, very important.
I'd like to welcome Mihai Bica from the Roma Support Group, which is a charity that supports Eastern European Roma in the UK. There he works as the Campaigns and Policy Officer. So Mihai, welcome.
Thank you.
the research shows that the overwhelming majority of respondents found out about the EU settlement scheme through support organisations such as yours. It also shows that 80% needed help to submit their application. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the two matters are strongly connected, as we are working with communities who are more likely not to speak English, more likely not to be able to access information digitally, and also more likely not to access information from the mainstream sources here in the UK, and rather are accessing sources of information from the countries of origin. Given that, and in addition to the fact that any communication developed for the purpose of reaching EU citizens did not fully take into account these vulnerabilities, I have to say that all these factors had a strong input into people actually not receiving information through the route that actually they should have, and therefore relying on organizations like us and family members. And why we have been more successful into informing people from our communities is because we have invested in building trust with them. It's because we have accessible means of communicating with them. We speak our languages, we address the vulnerabilities in terms of communications. So, for example, we ensure that the messages we developed are reached by the community and are understood by people from the community. Also, we are making efforts to empower and skill people from the community to share our messages forward. And therefore, the information reaches a wider audiences. And in regards of people accessing support, again, the factors that I mentioned earlier influence very much the ability of these people to actually go through a scheme such as the EU settlement scheme on their own without support. From our own analysis, we have seen that only 3% of our clients are able to complete an online application fully independent.
And we know from our research that nearly half of those who were granted pre-settled status were asked to submit additional evidence when applying. So what would you say are the challenges for the Roma, with that in mind, for the Roma community going forward, especially for those with pre-settled status?
Yes, well, I think people from all the EU communities will face difficulties regarding updating their pre-settled status to settled status. But I do have to say that we feel that those from the Roma communities will have extra difficulties, again, considering problems around literacy, considering problems around digital exclusion, around ability to use English, to read instructions and follow written instructions in English and so on. And not just because of these factors, but also considering the fact that, for example, from our own experience of supporting our clients through the EUSS, we have noticed that around 60% of our clients have been granted pre-settled status, comparing to the 43% for the national average. We see that the implications of pre-settled status are more likely to be a problem for those from our communities. The research has shown that people from communities such as ours are very much reliant on support available, and considering that it's likely this support will not be at such a high level in the future, we are concerned that people from the Roma communities will have problems in accessing the pre-settled status, in updating it, which means making a whole new application, in proving and finding evidence to prove their new application for settled status.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Cecilia Mellana, our EUSS Development Officer here at New Europeans UK. Got a couple of questions for you as well. So the research found that 68% of respondents don't know how to prove their status. What do we do about this?
Thank you, Bella. So that of a digital status in the form of an online immigration status and the process of proving it by using a share code are new concepts, which are difficult to understand, especially for those who are not confident with technology. This new immigration status requires to be maintained. Maintenance involves updating personal information such as new passport number, home address, phone number, or email address. It also requires to be proven to potential employers, landlords, or healthcare professionals. It follows that those who can't access their status may be prevented from proving eligibility for benefits, NHS services, or prevented from proving that they have a right to reside or to rent, to work, to study in the UK. This can happen for different reasons, such as not knowing the details for accessing the status or not having the necessary IT skills or tools, such as a smartphone or access to the internet. Together with this, we must also consider that less than half of our respondents declare that they are looking after their own status. But this doesn't mean that they will actually know how to manage their status. 37% replied that they don't know who is looking after their status. So they don't have the actual support to prove their status, for example. By contrast, 21% declare that someone else is looking after their status. This may sound good, but actually this creates a new form of dependency because some people are de facto prevented from accessing support or accepting a job offer or renting a house independently. Okay. This is why one of our recommendations, supported by many other organizations and groups working in the sector, is to implement the issue of a physical document to prove the status, especially for vulnerable applicants. This will ensure that everyone has access to their status and are able to prove it. This must be implemented together with the extension of the 3rd of June deadline and the use of paper application forms.
So the research showed that 73% of respondents with pre-settled status don't know how to reapply to get the more permanent settled status. What are the implications that you foresee with this, Ceci?
Okay, first of all, there is a lack of knowledge regarding the transition, as the process is unclear and abstract, as well as potentially difficult to perform. As you already said, 1.7 million of EU citizens and family members obtained the pre-settled status. This means that within a 5-year time frame, potentially, all of them will have to reapply for settled status, as the process is not automatic. If applicants don't successfully upgrade their status, they risk becoming undocumented and lose access to benefits, healthcare, the right to work, and to rent a property. This fits perfectly within the hostile environment policy conceived by the UK government. In order to upgrade from pre-settled status, which is a limited leave to remain, to settled status, which is the indefinite leave to remain, people will, first of all, be able to understand the difference between the two status. But we found that 12% of our respondents didn't know the difference. They also need to know that they need to reapply and they are eligible to apply. They need to have access to the status, otherwise they may miss the deadline and again lose access to benefits and the right to work. But this is not obvious, as they may have lost the details. So, for example, they may not have access to the email address. This also implies that they need to know when their status expires. The Home Office says that they will send a reminder to remind people that their pre-settled status is about to expire, but this may be too late. People will also need to have access to the internet and some form of digital literacy or be supported by someone else. So they also need to be able to show documents of 5 years of continuous residence. It can be difficult for those who were already asked to prove the residence, as we saw that 47% of people with pre-settled status were asked to prove additional evidence. So they will probably be asked again. So this situation will be solved not only with the issue of a physical card and an easier application process, but also by including the date of arrival in the UK into the application process. This would ensure that a reminder is sent when the person becomes eligible to settle status and not when the pre-settle status is about to expire. And then for those who are IT literate, to create an app, an official app, to make accessing the status easier, and then to ensure long-term support and promotion of the USS by continuing to fund the community and the voluntary sector, and to improve the Home Office technical and digital USS support also in other languages.
So thank you so much for listening in and being with us for this conversation with Comites and Roma Support Group and New Europeans UK. If you want to find out more, you can download the report, Digital Status Handled with Care, on our website, www.neweuropeans.uk. Thank you.